Okay, Pawan, let's get started on your reading. So today I decided I was going to do something different, right? So typically I'll just pre-shuffle and pre-pull some cards. Lately I have not been pre-pulling the cards, and today I thought maybe I could just do like a one card read, right? So I did the base for all readings, a base card, and then I chose one card for each individual person. Okay, water is very significant. So let's see. So the base was talk about the master that came to Jesus and asked about eternal life. Give up everything you have for a higher position. Now, typically I have 4 piles today. I know yesterday I said I was going to do 4 piles, but I completely forgot. So the fourth pile is here today, but in a different form, right? And so when I pulled the energy of the cards, they were relatively like positive, right? And as I went to get like the fourth card, I said, oh, like it's so great that all of these cards are upright. And in the fourth card, like for the fourth reading, it inverted. So when cards are inverted, for me, that's neither a yes or a no. But we'll see. Okay, so you pick a pile, pick a number between 1 to 4, and we'll get started. All right, so pile 1. Your card that came out was the typical owl, true owl card, right? And it says family is everything. Nurture them and they will nurture you. So in case you guys haven't seen it before, but it should be in one of like the previous readings. It's a pink card, right? And it has an owl, longhorn owl. Now, if you look closer at the card, you'll see a barn owl within that owl, and then you'll see another owl within that owl, and then you'll see an owl overhead, right? So this to me is the representation, which is probably more than likely why I made it the family card. It's a representation of lineage, right? Passed down from generation to generation. So nurture your family. Family is everything. Nurture them and they will nurture you. This gives me a reference to a mother and daughter dynamic, right? And I remember the particular story that came up for me for this pile was when I remembered I was little, and I say little because I don't know if it was like 8 or 9, or I can't remember, right? But I was young. I was fairly young. And so I remember just walking throughout the house because I was looking for my mom. And I went into like the childhood apartment where I grew up in Brooklyn. I went into what would be equivalent at that time into my brother's room. And I just remember my mom sitting on the floor, right? And she was just zoned out, like she was spaced out. And I didn't comprehend at the time, like the depths or the levels of depression that she was suffering from. I just knew as a child, picking up that energy, that she was really sad, right? And so I remember talking to her, and I started like trying to pull her up, like to get up. And I just remember crying, right? And so there was a moment in time where, she actually did get up, and then she just, she picked herself up, and then she just focused on like the day, like the moment ahead, right? Anywho, a couple years later, I don't want to say a couple years later because I remember I was in my 20s. We were at a restaurant, and she said, hey, do you remember the day I was sitting on the floor and I was like really down and out, and you came into the room and, you started crying and you were pulling on my arm? I said, yeah, I remember that. And she goes, yeah, I remember when you said, you were talking about the things I didn't do anymore. And then she was like, you were telling me, oh, mom, what's wrong? You don't do your hair anymore. You're not smiling. You're not happy. You're not going out. Come on, mom. All you have to do is just get up. Just get up, mom. Right? And so I do not, like, to this day, like, I remember the story, but I do not remember saying that to her, right? And so she says, you don't, and then going back into the moment we were at the restaurant, she said, you don't remember telling me that? And I said, no, I don't remember. And she was like, huh. So when, to say that story, there's a moment in time where you could either, it could be your mom or it could be your daughter. They're remembering the time where they were just in a really dark space, and it was because of you and your words and your actions that allowed them to get up, right? So, and usually this would be the time I'm clarifying the card, but I'm not. I'm going to just focus on this one card and we're going to talk about it. So, this family member, whoever this is that you have helped out of like a state of depression, it's like they're remembering all the times that you have nurtured them and they want to nurture you, right? Or they want to remind you just how much of an inspiration you were at that particular moment. And sometimes when we're in the moment of something, we tend to just think, well, I'm the mother, I'm supposed to do this, or I'm the daughter, I'm supposed to do this. But it's it's more than just obligation because you are a family member, and it's more so you can see it from a standpoint of, well, that's what family's supposed to do, but your family member is seeing it from a space of, wow, like you did that for me. You reminded me of who I was, you reminded me that there's so much more than just. So I feel like you are, in regards to the base being talk about the master that came to Jesus and asked about eternal life. I feel like you are reaching a higher position in regards to the way family perceives you, because they are remembering all the moments that you were actually there to like pick them up, inspire them, and like you've made quite an impression to the point they won't ever forget. Like, yeah, there was a time that, this person, pile one could be this, they could be that, but there was a time where, remember when they did this? It's like you leave an imprint, or you are leaving your mark on your family in such a way where should something happen, or should you feel like the roles are reversed, they're going to be there to pick you up. Okay. Okay, pile one, that is your reading. Okay, pile two. So the card that you have is a judgment card, and it is so the judgment card is the Ma'at card. Now, if you look at it, right, some of the cards will have the initials of SBT, and some of them will not, right? But SBT stands for my first and last name, and the T stands for tarot. So when you look at this card, right, it should be in one of the previous readings. So, or maybe I might take a picture towards the end, guys. I don't know. So this way I don't have to like, but when you look at the card, you see one of the many representations of Ma'at. And then if you look down, you'll see that I put pyramid within a pyramid within a pyramid within a pyramid, right? And the representation of the all-knowing eye is on top of her, right? So it's like you could be like a psychic, or you could be a tarot reader, or you could be somebody that can see like beyond your years, right? And or yeah, why is beyond your years? I think that's the phrase for it. But yeah, so the judgment card is your judgment is a beautiful life and an even more beautiful end to this karmic cycle. So you've closed something out officially, right? Something about positions. You released the position that was no longer serving you or did not make you feel happy, in order to ascend into the position that you know is going to make you extremely happy. And I can use this from a reference point of, let's say you were so used to having this cycle of doing the everyday 9 to 5, 30 minutes to an hour break rooms, coworkers that you may or may not like, or find yourself having to deal with because they're all a part of the company, but, and just work politics, right? And it's just like getting to a point where you realize that kind of cycle does not work for you. And so you say, you know what? I don't want to be just the person that's just doing the 9 to 5. I want to be my own boss. I want to be in a position of power. I want to be in a position of I say how long my break is, and I say when I work, and I say when I don't work, right? And so you put yourself now in this position, like I'm going to break this cycle of what everybody wants me to perceive my time to be, like working for another company, and I'm going to redefine the definition of what time is for me, right? So it's like you're redefining your time, and you're defining what does it mean to have time spent on something, on someone, or place, project, like you. Did you guys hear that bird? Anywho, but place, project, like you are deciding, okay, what's valuable to you, right? And so something is, and this form, this kind of life that you're creating for yourself, you view it as a beautiful life. You don't view it as a life of, oh, I just got to do this to get by. Like, no, it's like, so aesthetically, like you want the type of life that's not only fulfilling internally, but it's aesthetically pleasing to the naked eye, to your eye, right? So, and you're combining those worlds together, right? Whereas you couldn't really combine them in the past. It's very easy for you to do it now. So there's definitely a shift that has happened, and you've closed out this cycle. And maybe your way of thinking also, because what's zooming in for me is karmic. Like maybe you changed like what would be considered like karmic habits. I don't want to say toxic because I don't get toxicity here, but I just get like this. You broke the pattern of this never ending karmic loop. Like, oh, it's the same cycle, it's the same process, it's the same routine, and I'm doing this routine, and I'm not even happy about it. Nadia is significant also. Um, is there anything else you need to know? Cycle. Cycle and circles, right? It's like you go from being a part of the karmic cycle to doing circles around these cycles, around these cycles. Okay, pile 2. That's your reading. Pile 3. Okay, so the base card that I have here is talk about the master that came to Jesus and asked about eternal life, give up everything you have, higher position. And so I'm doing a 1 card pull, guys. So I'm not going to use any clarifiers. I got a base card for all the readings, and then it's just 1 card per pile, okay? So the card that you got was the decision making card, and it says sometimes you got to throw caution to the wind and just face your fears. Okay. For your reading, pile 3, the example that I got was when I was living in New York and I came across a financier, which we ended up being friends, right? But how do I put that? Like, we ended up being friends, but we met at his workspace because I wanted an account open, and he was just like, look, we're booked for today, and we don't have like any representatives that are available. And I came in with the determination of I'm getting this account open, right? So long story short, got the account open. Also, we exchanged numbers, right? Because we were having a conversation, and remember he asked me, he said, what was the last book that I read, right? Because he reads a lot of books. And so I told him the last book I read, but I don't think it was something he was expecting me to say. So we kind of laughed, but he understood the allure to the book that I mentioned. So, man, so I remember impressions. So this is all about impressions, probably. So I remember when we actually met up outside of his job, and outside of me working, because at the time I was a head baker and I barely had any sort of a social life, and he was a financier, so he was on a set schedule. And so when we met up, he said, he asked me, he said, what is a place you've always wanted to go to, right? And so I said, well, I've always wanted to go to Paris. Um, so he said, okay. He's like, Paris. And he's like, so you know what we're gonna do? We're not in New York anymore, Samantha. We're in Paris, right? And what he did was he set up the hangout to do what people in Paris do. And he was telling me about the history and everything like that. It was really cool. Like, he really made an impression on me, right? And so we were talking. It came to the end of we hung out like pretty much from the afternoon all the way like late into the night, right? And there was a moment in time where we were talking. We were in like the park. We were in the Fort Greene Park, and we were talking about numbers, which I knew this was going to happen, right? So we were talking about numbers, and he was talking to me about the symbol, the dollar sign symbol. He's like, okay, well, do me a favor, right? And he pulls out a pen and he pulls out a piece of paper. He says, show me how you would write the dollar sign. And so I wrote the dollar sign, but I wrote like one, right? So it's like one line going across like the symbol of the S. And he was like, huh. It's like, that's interesting, because most people don't do that. When they think of the dollar sign, they'll write the S and then they'll do the two lines. And so he broke down the system in regards to what's the representation of the dollar sign. It's not so much what you owe, but it's what's owed to you, right? And then I remember he showed me the World Bank, which I think I talked about this in a previous reading, but he showed me the World Bank, and he was like, tell me something, how would you pronounce that, right? And there were so many commas that it was like, you couldn't say it was beyond millions, billions, trillions, millions. It was beyond that, right? It was like, how would you, it's like, there's a depth so big, like, that's apparent to be so big that you can't even pronounce it, right? We don't even have the word to convey that number. He said, but that is what's owed, right? And then I had a couple theories, right, in regards to what I felt was like why there was such a deficit. And I touched on that. And I remember like telling him, I said, do you think it's because like, and I went into like my personal view on like the Mayan calendar and like the systems and the setups. And then he said, well, okay. And then he said, well, okay, we can see it like that, right? He said, but he brought up something interesting, and I forgot the way he like formed the sentence, but he pretty much formed it to let me know, like, all of this is just an illusion, right? Like this depth, this like the numbers, like all of it, right? And so it's just the way he did it. I can't remember, but he systematically broke it down, right? And so afterwards I said, that makes a lot of sense. And so there was one time where it got to a point, and I kept trying to figure out why. I'm like, okay, I feel like all I'm attracting is financiers into my world, and I don't understand why this is happening. So, and I'll give you an example. When I was a head baker, right, and I worked doing what I loved. I love to bake, guys. I love to bake, but when you're baking wholesale versus when you're just baking one order or a couple orders, it's a different ballgame, right? It's a different frame of mind. Like, everything is done in bulk, right? So it's not like 2 grams, it's now 200 grams, it's not 500 grams, it's now 1500. And some of these recipes at a time could easily be multiplied by like 8, 9, 10, right? So I remember I was working at this bakery. It's a macaroons spot now because they switched over into macaroons instead of like muffins and brownies and like what I used to do for them. And so I remember asking my former boss, I said, hey, what was your occupation before this? She said, well, I was the VP of Chase and I worked at the headquarters in Manhattan. And I said, whoa, right? And so it was like a husband and wife dynamic. And so um, I would work with them. It would be the three of us, like because they were just, they were developing it and they were the head of their company, right? So I was like, whoa, you were the VP of Chase. And when she broke her story down, like it's the amount of dedication and work this woman put in to like just life, right? And so because she didn't come from, even though she was of Asian descent, she didn't come from a place where she was just automatically rich. I feel like I'm going somewhere with this Power 3, so bear with me. And if you need to speed this up, speed it up, right? But she wasn't rich and she came from very humble beginnings. Now, did she witness other family members, like other uncles and like aunts being rich? Of course she did, right? But she also broke down to me and explained to me the whole system with certain Asian cultures, and how there could be subtle to a very extreme segregation between families based on how much you make and based on your wealth, right? How much you have, because that ultimately determines if those family members see you as valuable or they see you as like the haves and the have-nots. So I remember she broke that down to me, and she was definitely on the side of like very humble beginning have-not, right? And so she worked. And then I was just like, what? Like, what got you to the point you were VP? She was just like, to be honest, she said, I just read a lot, right? And she said, not only did she read a lot, but when she was in college, she went to Penn, I believe. I think it was Penn State, but she went to Penn State, and she said, whenever I had to do work and I had chapters to read, she was like, I didn't just read the chapter once. I was reading that chapter 3 times over, right? And then she broke it down. She said the first time was to observe, the second time was to grasp the concept, the third time was to perfect the knowledge that she had obtained. So she never read the way like most people would read, right? And so she was like, I just kept reading. I was in the library. I just kept studying. Like my head was down. I just wanted to do, you know. And then she said the way like her life had been set up, not set up, but the way that where she came from to where she graduated from, she said it was the chances of her even getting into the position that she got into was like 1 in a billion, right? Like these chances don't happen, but they happened for her. And so, she told me her story, and it was just like whoa, like I was just so amazed, right? And then I remember her husband was like, oh, you should have saw how much money she was actually pulling in when she was VP. And she was like, yeah, but it's just money, right? And and then she was just like, it wasn't got to the point it wasn't fulfilling, because I asked her, I was like, why did you leave if you were making so much money? And she was like, well, it's just money. And so he was like, yeah, but her husband was like, yeah, but with that just money, you're able to afford a condo, you're able to do this, you're able to get that, you're able to. And then I was just like, well, I said, yeah, like it's nice to be able to afford the nice things, but if you're not happy, then what's the use of all that money? She said, exactly, right? And I remember like just thinking about it, and I was like, well, what was it that like really did it for you, right? Like what was that moment of, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm just gonna go into baking. Because I'm like, that's quite the transition. So she said, yeah, it is. She said, well, she dealt with a lot of, um, where she worked, it was like predominantly male, right? So that was one of the particular reasons why she left, because she was young, and the people that she had to work alongside with was like half her age. I mean, like twice her age, sorry. But she looked at it from a standpoint of, all right, because I'm half their age, and because I am of, of a certain background, and even down to the gender. She was like, I'm working in a environment where they'll respect me, but it's just so far that I can go unless I really put in the work. And she saw it. She saw all the levels that she went to, right? And then she went into the room because she was about to replace somebody else in regards to like the levels of like being VP, and she was about to replace like someone else. And so she talked to that person, and she said, in the middle of talking to this guy about her role and her position and what the factors she would have to play, she was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. Right? She was just done. And so I said, like, so afterwards, like realizing that you weren't happy, she was like, and then I was just like, was it like just that? It was just like a matter of like, you're not happy, you want to do something more fulfilling. She said, honestly, she said, I started to look at the numbers, I started to look at the anomalies, and she said, it started to just become boring to me, right? So it's like and she said it in a sense of it became too easy. Like it became too easy to figure out the problems, to figure out the notions, figure out the digits. Like all of that stuff became too easy. Now, this was somebody who was used to seeing numbers we can't pronounce, right? And so that became too easy. So she left, and she decided that she wasn't happy, and she started doing this, right? Which was her own shop, her own bakery. And she said, I have yet to have made any money off of this company where we're selling baked goods and macaroons. She's like, a lot of it is like break even. She said, but the knowledge that I have obtained, right? She said I could, and she talked about like stocks and portfolios. She said I can take somebody's $50, I can take their $100, and I can turn it into thousands in a matter of moments, right? And so she said, if you stay with me long enough, then I'm going to teach you how to do this. I did not stay 503. I didn't stay because for me, the goal was, man, or one of the many goals that I had growing up was, man, I cannot wait to bake, and I'll bake and I'll distribute my baked goods all around the world, right? And I'll be so successful, I'll be so happy. And then I got put in that position where I got exactly what I wanted, and I was not happy, right? So, and I wasn't happy because even though I was baking the goods, I was distributing it like throughout the 50 states. I just felt like the work environment was not conducive to like the actual dream in itself, right? Like if somebody would have told me, oh yeah, and 2024 in 2024 around March, you're going to be working for the former VP of Chase, and you're going to be distributing muffins to like coffee boutiques and making muffins for the hotels because this company's partnered with the Marriott. I'd have never believed you, right? I'd just been like, oh, whatever. But it got to the point it happened, and I was just like, I thought I was supposed to have some form of fulfillment. How is it that I'm making all these muffins, I'm doing all these wholesales, I'm doing all these bakers, and I'm not happy? I'm happy to be baking, but I'm not happy. And I got like a real bad, it came to a point I got real bad anxiety. Like I would walk into that kitchen and my hands would start to shake, right? Because there was just this amount of pressure. And so afterwards, I said, all right, I'm going to, like, I respectfully resigned. And I remember when I saw her again, because I had to get my W-2. I had to get my tax money. And I remember I was having a conversation with her, and I told her, I said, I'm leaving New York, and I'm not going to come back. She's like, but New York is the best place to have all the opportunities. I said, yeah, but I just feel like it's time for me to leave, right? And so she said, well, where are you going to go? I said, well, I'm going to Florida. And at the time, I thought I was going to go to like Fort Myers, but that is not where I ended up. So she was just like, well, where in Florida are you gonna go? I said, I'll be honest with you, I don't know. She was like, are you hiding this information from me? I'm like, no, I'm not. I genuinely don't know where I'm gonna end up in Florida. I just know I'm going because that's where my brother is. And so she was like, well, you know, I wish the best for you, and I always consider you, and I will always consider you to be one of the best employees I've ever had. And I said, well, thanks. I consider you to be one of the best bosses I've ever had, right? And so afterwards, I just remember thinking, like, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. But it was just a process, right? And so kept attracting financiers. So I'm just remembering that in my mind, guys, because I'm coming back around to that. So anywho, so then I didn't know what was going to happen when I moved to Florida. I ended up in a place in Florida I had no idea even existed. Like, I was just like, wait, what? What is this place? Like, I thought it was gonna be sunny weather all the time. Like, no, in this part of Florida, it gets cold. Like, the summer gets cold. There are blizzards. Like, so anywho, so I remember afterwards I came here and I didn't know what was gonna happen, right? Um, but as I mentioned in previous readings, I just knew that I was going to do something and I didn't want to twiddle my thumbs and be in my brother's house all day. So that's when I decided to go into daycare because I had experience in it. And, you know, that is a whole story in itself. But taking that risk, right? And this was a risk that I had to take because I felt like there was nothing for me in New York anymore. And on top of that, it's like I was not wanted in New York and I did not want to be in New York. Okay. So came to Florida and I've just been going with the motions of, okay, life is happening. I am adulting, but I don't know if I'm comfortable. And I think that's the point, right? It's just like whenever we're fearful of something, it's because something makes us uncomfortable, and it makes us uncomfortable because we're not 100% sure as to what's going to happen next. Okay, so I have been trying to get this idea out of my head that it is okay, it is absolutely okay and possible to live a comfortable life without having to feel guilty about it or shameful about it or, oh, because I want to do things differently or because I want to do a different approach, I don't know what's going to happen, right? And it really comes down to you, right? It really comes down to the risk you're willing to take in order to receive the reward you know you deserve. And so I say that to say, I woke up one day, right? This week I woke up and I asked myself, I thought about all the encounters I've ever had with financiers. I mean, even though I only mentioned two references, guys, the way I attract these, like, just people in finance is unreal to me. So I kept pushing that question to myself, like, why is it I'm attracting like a certain group? Like, no matter what I do, I cannot remove myself from a certain group of people who know numbers. I don't know numbers the way they know numbers, but yet they're attracted to me. I don't understand why. So I remember I just kept pushing that question, like, why is it? Like, why? How is it that I'm pulling like these kind of people in, right? And then the other day I had a thought and I said, what if I could create something that would do ABC XYZ 1 2 3 yada yada yada, right? I'm not gonna say it online, but what if I could do something that would just bring this to a certain level or a certain capacity? And as soon as I said that, pile three, the doors just, it felt like floodgates have opened up, right? And so it opened up in a sense of like, oh, good. Now that she's asked this question, now I can show her, like, from a higher self perspective. Now I can show her why this has been happening, that's been happening, one, two, three has been happening. And I said, no way. Like, I saw everything out, right? And I said, how on earth am I going to create something like that? And so, pile three, maybe you're wondering, okay? Maybe you're wondering how you are going to do your next great thing. How is it? Why is it you're attracting a certain group of people? Why is it you are producing a certain amount of numbers? What is it about you? And I feel like your higher self is answering your question from a sense of, well, look at who you are, right? And it's just like, not who you want to become, but look at who you are now. And so, facing the unknown, I feel like pile three, you're facing a lot of your fears. This could have to do with taking a flight somewhere. This could have to do with knowing, like, let's say you are somebody who knows a lot of knowledge, right? Like, you have a lot of knowledge about a lot of things, right? And so what's happening is now your higher self is like, oh, great. Well, now that you've obtained all this information, we're going to dig a little deeper, or we're going to dive a little deeper, because I know the level of knowledge I'm about to bestow upon you, you not only need, but you're going to see as to why you've been attracting or like magnetizing this idea of what is supposed to come to you and what is supposed to just flow in, right? And so, and I see a higher position, right? It's like you're gonna face your fear to do something, to just, because throw caution to the wind is just like it's like, fuck it, I'm just gonna do this, right? Or forget it, I'm just gonna do that. Like, I'm just gonna go all in and then just see what happens. Or I'm just gonna take this risk and see what happens. And the fact that it's saying just face your fears, it's like, whatever this is, going back to my financier friend of mine, whatever this is that is presenting itself as a fear is really just an illusion, right? It's like, don't be afraid of something that is not real, right? Because nothing really is and everything really isn't, kind of thing. Okay, part three, that's your reading. Okay, part four, last but not least, the inverted card. See what we got here. Fate over illusions and visions over fear. Boy who dreamt and saved school and the bomber. Read this story when I was in the library in my high school, as some of you may know if you check out my readings. But I read the story of this boy. He had a dream, right? That he was going to fight another boy, and the other boy that he was fighting had a bomb attached to him. Now, he was fighting this boy, and he woke up in mid-fight, right? He woke up from his dream, and he said the first thing he did was he asked God, am I going to die? God never answered, right? And so he goes to the school, and just exactly how it was in his dream, it played out exactly like to the nine from what he's saying and from what I'm reading in his newspaper, right? And so plays out, and he starts to fight this boy. Now, he starts to fight the boy because he's got to stop this boy from going into the school, right? But not only does he fight this boy and he saves the school and he saves all the kids in the school, but he saves the bomber, right? And so when the interviewer asked, the interviewer said, were you scared that you were fighting another boy with a bomb attached to him? And then he said, of course I was scared. He said, but I was more afraid of what would have happened had I not responded to the dream that I had. And one of the things that gives me chills about that story is that there's a part where the boy says when he went to, like, the location not too far from the school, The boy that he saw in his dream looked at him as though he were waiting for him to show up. Okay? So, pile 4, your base card is talk about the master that came to Jesus and asked about eternal life and give up everything you have for a higher position. Now, I think about the boy, right, who came to the school, had that vision, okay, didn't know how the vision was going to play out, still went to the school anyway, fought the boy, and saved everybody's life, including the bomber, okay? So there's something in regards to you have a vision, okay? And with this vision, there's something telling you you have to see it through. And maybe it's scary, okay? Maybe there isn't literally a person attached to a bomb that wants to fight you to the end. Maybe you have that in regards to maybe the bomber is a representation of not answering the call, not being able to fulfill your greatest purpose, not being like brave enough to just step out and say, you know what, if I'm gonna go, I'm gonna go, but I'm gonna go in a way where at least I did something, at least I responded the way I felt it in my heart to respond. So there's something of that nature, right? And so your visions, I feel like the reason you have these visions is because you have to shatter this illusion, not just for yourself, but for other people. You have to see your visions could be a representation of your gifts and abilities. You have to see your gifts and abilities in a way where it's like these were given to you because you're meant to do something like extraordinary with them, right? And so with the boy and the bomber, something feels like a lot, right? Something feels like a lot to you. But it's the notion of, if I don't do this, if I don't answer the call, if I don't respond to what my heart is telling me to respond to what I know, if I don't step out on faith, I'll never know how I could have impacted that situation, right? And so in the middle of talking about the boy and the bomber, the card, like I picked up the card again and it was no longer inverted, but now it's upright. So you're going to respond. You're going to respond to your dreams and your abilities and what you know you're capable of doing. Now, you don't know how it's going to turn out, but I'm here to tell you, Pal 4, it turns out a lot better than you're actually anticipating, okay? Do you believe that you can save somebody that has not only the possibility of hurting others or ending another person's life, but do you believe that you can save somebody from inflicting that kind of pain and taking their own life? Because that is the kind of ability you hold with your gifts, with your visions, right? And so to you, it just seems like, maybe it just seems like, oh, I'm just doing this for entertainment purposes only. Oh, I'm just doing this so I can earn more income. Oh, I'm just doing this so this way I can build my company, like what I started from the ground up. But you have to know it's so much more than that, right? And I hope that this reading gives you that idea that it's so much more than just what you think it is, right? And I think about it also from a sense of that boy that saw that vision. Anybody else could have saw that. You know what I mean? Like, I think about it from a sense like, why did God give that boy that vision? Why did God give him that dream? And why did God make him play out that? It's because he was brave enough to do it. Could you imagine having such a strong-willed consciousness or subconscious to the point you can see a bomber in your mind, not know if you're going to live to tell the day you fought a bomber and actually survive and save the bomber? Could you imagine the level of bravery, the level of strong will a person has to have, not knowing the outcome? Okay, so Pile 4, I say that to tell you, right? When you impact the world doing exactly what it is you do, you could be a guide, you could be a teacher, you could be a tarot reader, you could be a healer, you could be a financier, you could be a baker, you could be anybody, right? But when you take the time to just see something through, you're going to change the world in such a way you never saw coming. But you got to step out on faith. And it's hard. Trust me, I know. Oh my gosh, do I know? Do I know? Do I know? It's very hard to step out on faith and say, you know what, I can do this. It is possible. This is why I was given the idea, right? This is why I was given the vision. I have to see this through. It's hard. But this is why you're given, I call them destiny helpers. You're given destiny helpers along the way. You're given guides, you're given teachers, you're given anybody you need as a representation of, hey, you can do this, right? So like, it's possible. So just know, Pile 4, whoever you are, you are your own hero, and you being your own hero and responding to your vision, you end up being the savior for a lot of people, like a lot more than you know. Just you're in a physical body, and this is how I'm supposed to describe it to you. You are in a physical body with the ability to heal on an eternal level. Okay, Pile 4, that's your reading.